Well, Debbie, thank you for being on the show today. Why don't you let our audience know a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your past? Because today we're going to be talking about parenting, and I want our audience to know a little bit about your past to see how your parenting experience was.
Okay, to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a mother of three right now. It was four, but I lost a daughter, one of my twin daughters, at the age of 9. So I'm a proud mother. The other three are very successful in what they're doing. So I'm just proud of them. I do have 11 grandchildren, and I have two great grands through marriage. So I'm just super proud of all of my kids and my grandkids and what they're doing. I'm a retiree, been retired since 2001 from Verizon. I was always a northerner and moved down to Florida in 2002, and I've been down here ever since. And I have to say, I enjoy the Florida weather. I enjoy Florida. I do miss my children because most of my family is still up
Up
north.
north.
Yeah, so it's and it's tough. And right now with the way things are going, I'm not sure when I'm going to get back up there again. I'm hoping soon, because I did have the opportunity to get up there like about every month. So and that was really great.
Yeah, with the way things are going, both Florida and New York are in the New England area, are kind of all in trouble right now with the virus.
Exactly, exactly. And I have to say that I am a widow. I lost my husband about September 1st will be 4 years that I lost him. And so it's been really tough. It's been rough.
Yeah.
And that's what's currently going on. I can tell you that I'm one of 9 children.
Oh, wow. I
So
didn't
I had
know
a
that.
big family, and I have to say my background is we grew up poor. I mean, we didn't have a whole lot. I mean, so, and I've even marveled at where I've come from and where I am right now. I do have to say that growing up, it is tough when you're from a large family, because trying to, I would say, like, spread the love around to all 9 children, you don't always hear, I love you, I'm proud of you, and things like that. So it is tough, and I didn't get a whole lot of it. And unfortunately, I ended up getting pregnant at a young age. I was out of high school, and I ended up with twin girls. And I'm telling you, that was, I mean, I lost that time that I would normally be out with my friends, be enjoying life, enjoying my 20s. But then I had to learn how to be responsible, because not only taking care of myself, but I had to take care of
Yeah.
twin girls.
So you had to grow up
So,
fast.
had to grow up real fast, exactly, and get a job, be responsible. I was still trying to go to school at the same time, and it was tough. It really was tough, and that's a little bit of somewhere I've come from. I have to say that I grew up in the church. My parents actually brought us up in the church. I had a head knowledge. I can tell you back then and there, I did not have a heart knowledge of Jesus Christ at that time. They even had me teaching the Sunday school class, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, because I'm just reciting things out of the Bible, it's that head knowledge part of it. And it really wasn't until 1976 when I was challenged. I ended up changing churches. I used to go to like the African Methodist Episcopal churches and United Methodist churches, and went to them. But they were my dad's. It was my dad and my mom's churches. But I ended up being invited to a Baptist church from my girlfriend. Started going in 1976, and I heard the pastor say, "Are you born again?" I'm like, "Born again? What's he talking about? Born again?" And it wasn't until I started continuing to go to the church, started reading, really, really wanting to know what the Bible was really about, till I realized I had not been saved. All along, I had this head knowledge, but had not accepted Christ as my personal Savior. And at that point is when I gave my life over to Jesus Christ at that time. And I realized, okay, I now have that heart knowledge. A little bit of background after that, it just seems like, I don't know, it's like the minute you try to do right and you turn your life around is when the devil starts throwing those arrows left and right and left and right. And I can remember in January of 77, was a new Christian. I wanted to know more about the Lord, and wanted to do the things that I needed to do to walk with the Lord. And in January of 77, I lost my dad at the age of 52.
Oh, wow.
And it was like we had never known any real death in the family. I hadn't known any real death. So that was like, it was really, really hard on me. And then in right after that, in March of 77, my girlfriend calls me wee hours of the morning to say that her cousin, who I knew very well, was killed in a car crash. She had been thrown through the windshield, and she leaves a baby behind. And I'm telling you, at that point, I got on my knees, and I was like, if I didn't know God at that point, I knew him then, because
Yeah.
I cried out to him, God, please turn my life around. You took my dad, you took Wanda, and you could take me tomorrow. I need to get my life straight, and I need to keep it straight at this point. And it was from that point that things started changing in my life. Things started going really well. I ended up getting a promotion on my job, and was doing very well. Because in the beginning, when I first went out on my own, people laughed at me at times because when they would come to my little apartment, I had this blow-up furniture and these little plastic parson tables, and they would laugh, and I was like, look, this is the best I can do, at the time. And then once I got a promotion and things started going well, I was able to lay away some furniture and things started looking up. But then, as it would be with anything, you have those peaks and you have those valleys. I was on that.
That's the way
I was
life
I was
goes.
I was really up there, and then all of a sudden the valley hits in October of that same year that my dad died. That I find out that my twin daughter had bone cancer.
Oh, wow.
So
That must have
I
been
mean,
hard.
really hard. I mean, at that point, and it was at that point that I started to question God even. Why would you, why would you allow this to happen to a 7-year-old at the time? So I have to say that really, really talk about life experiences and a change of life and a change of direction. I mean, it just threw me for a loop at the time. So, but I guess if it hadn't been for accepting Christ as my personal savior to start with, God knows where I would have been at that point, because I can tell you, I did have the support of the church. I had the support of my friends. And at that point is when I really turned to the Lord in prayer, because, even though I question him, because God does want us, he doesn't want us to say, oh, God, everything is hunky-dory, everything is fine, yeah, I've got all these trials and troubles, but I'm fine. And so at that point, I had to rely on prayer to get me through each day, because with
Yeah.
the number of surgeries she had to go through, because she had to have her leg amputated, her hip and leg amputated, and then she
Wow.
had subsequent surgeries after that where it metastasized in the lungs and then in the ribs. And I mean, we went through so many surgeries at that point. I mean, toward the end, one of the surgeries, when I went in to see her and she was in ICU, she looked up at me and she said, "Mommy, no more." And at that point,
That must have been hard.
I knew that there's no way I can put this child through any more of it. And of course, we continue to, we continued the chemo, we continued to do everything we could, hoping that we would beat that battle. But we subsequently did not beat it, because she passed away at the age of 9.
And I actually didn't know that part of the story. And that, for me, as a dad, resonates with me. I couldn't imagine, I have 2 little kids of my own. I could not imagine putting my kid through that much, and then them saying that would break my heart
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, and it did. But at that point, I had to remain strong, because I knew I had to remain strong for her. But to be honest with you, she was even stronger than me. She was a 9-year-old, was stronger in her faith than her mother. I mean, she would witness to other people. When people would come to the house, come to the hospital, she would be witnessing to them. And they would be, I know my girlfriend's mother, she said, Miss Doris, she said, guess what? She said, I'm never going to complain about anything, because every time I ask Sonia, how you doing? She said, oh, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. And she said, if that child can go through it, why do I complain about the little aches and pains that I have with all that she's going through? And I can tell you that bringing her up in the church, because once I accepted Christ as my personal savior and got involved in the church, it was my goal to make sure that my girls were also raised in the church and had that saving knowledge of God. And I can tell you that, and something I had shared with you a while ago also was the little thing that she wrote somewhere between the age of 8. This child had, and it had to be a God thing, where she wrote my prayer, and she wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd. We trust in him. We love him. You should pray to him. He can see you and hear you. Everyone in the whole wide world loves him. Some people don't love God and don't believe in him, but I know I do. When you pray and you ask God for something, you may not get it." She says, she says, sometimes you have to wait until he thinks you are ready for what you want. And sometimes you may not get it. But don't worry, God may think that you don't need it. And she says, and forgive me because sometimes the writing is a little bit, it's sometimes a little bit blurry on here because we had to have this recopy. But she says, "Whoever doesn't believe in God, I will try to pray for you." And the prayer was for anyone. And that's what she wrote. And my daughter had it laminated for
that's
us,
awesome.
her twin sister. But I mean, it was only from bringing her up in the Lord and bringing her up in the church that she had that saving knowledge of God, and she knew where she was going.
That's awesome. And a lot of people don't understand how essential. I know the church isn't looked upon very well right now, but a lot of people don't realize how essential it is amongst us Christians to bring up our children in church. Although I'm pretty sure you did a good job of doing the same thing at home. And so you've done a great job of giving us kind of a history of what's going on. What else in your life has any other kind of life-defining moments that you've had that have made you into the woman you are today?
Well, I would say the other defining moments would be even when it comes to job. I told you, yes, I retired. I retired after 30 years with Verizon. But there was a time in my life where it wasn't all about the money. It was more about quality of life. It was more about spending more time with family, less stress in my life. And I've shared with you and with others also where there was a time where my doctor said, "You're either going to need to be put on tranquilizers or you need to find another job." And I realized that finding another job or whatever changes I would make would impact the family financially. But I just prayed, I prayed, I prayed. And it was a message I heard going to work one morning about how God takes care of the birds. He takes care of the lilies, the flowers, and I'm a higher order than him. And right then and there, I said, this is my answer. I have to downgrade. And that's the day I told my boss, I said, I'm going to downgrade. And I think my faith got even stronger at that point because I was bold in it where she was like, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. And I'm like, no, I'm going to put my letter on your desk. And when you get in tomorrow, because she was off that day, when you get in, we can talk about it. But I've made my mind up. And I've said before, what they did, they made me wait from February until July before they would let me downgrade because they were hoping that I would change my mind. Because I do have to say that I was a good assistant manager. I pride myself in excellence in all that I do. My work ethics, I have very high work ethics. And so just going through that, I just strengthened me even more. And it's remarkable. The other thing that defining is going through the sickness of my husband. My husband battled cancer for 8 years. And it was off and on 3 different times where the cancer, we thought we had beat it. He goes into remission. It comes back again. Every 3 years it seemed to come back. And I have to tell you that talk about defining moments. Talk about being down on your knees and crying out to the Lord many a time. I mean, there was one time in particular when I didn't think he was going to make it. His kidneys, for some reason, we were having problems with his kidneys and had taken him down to the ER. And kidneys started shutting down. He ended up getting sepsis. And the doctor there asked me that it was wee hours of the morning, just the 2 of us were in the surgical waiting room. And he said, do you have a DNR order, like do not resuscitate? And I said, I'm going to tell you something about my husband. My husband is a fighter. And he said, I'm going to keep fighting all the way to the end. He said, you don't have to ask me. I don't need your answer. I know what it is at this point, that we'll do everything we can, to keep him alive. And I left the hospital that night, and I came home, and I got down on my knees, and I cried out. I mean, just cried out to the Lord. And he heard my prayers, because the next day I went in, he had turned the corner. He was doing so much better. He wasn't out of the woods, but he was doing better. And so just even going through that, I think strengthened my faith. It strengthened that I know God heard my prayer. And even through his death, I look at it that God answered prayer in that he didn't heal him here, but he is healed in heaven. And even doing the what I went through with my daughter and what I went through with him, I always relied on the scripture that talked about hope in tribulation. And my hope in tribulation is that I'm going to see both of them again. And it just strengthened me, my faith in the Lord. And, it just changed me. It really did. It changed my life.
Definitely do.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was the former youth pastor at your church, and I remember Rudy was going through cancer.
Yeah.
And I remember some of those valleys. I mean, he had been battling cancer before I even got there.
Yeah.
And so I remember some of that. And I've told you this before, but his funeral impacted my life. I mean, everybody that got up there just said such incredible things about him, that he was such a man of integrity and all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't, I've as a pastor, I've had to attend a ton of funerals. And, that was the one that impacted me, because it's like, man, if half of those things are said at my funeral, I would be happy. I mean, people just coming up in droves. Usually at a funeral, you don't want the open mic kind of situation,
Right.
but because you don't know what people are going to say. But it was just person after person coming up saying such incredible things about him. I'm like, I want to live my life in a way when I pass away, that's the kind of stuff people say about me.
Yeah.
And so that truly affected me in my life. And so, I don't want you to think that your family hasn't had an impact in my life. I didn't get to know Rudy very much because he was in and out of the hospital a lot while I was there. But that part I remember was so impactful to me.
Right.
And
And Rudy was I mean, people would look at him and he was just like a peaceful, even-tempered type person. Quite different from me. I guess odds attract each other, because the girls, I just pulled out some letters recently, like little note cards that the youngest daughter wrote talking about her dad, and she must have had to do something for school on what did she like about her dad, and she wrote in there about how patient he was, and if there was something really important that she needed to talk about, she would go to him, and she'd go to him before she came to me because he was more patient. And the same with my oldest daughter. I mean, anything that they needed. I mean, even though he was not my oldest daughter's biological father, that was her father. And she told him that, and how he inspired her so much. And I think a lot of it was that once Rudy turned his life over to the Lord, that what he did was he became involved in the church also. And that took a little coaxing, because when I first married him, he had a head knowledge too. He didn't have a heart knowledge. And it was a cousin of mine that when he was moving, after we got married, he was moving, closing up his apartment and moving with me. His cousin, who had been someone that was out there in the world drinking and whatever, Rudy happened to said, "Hey man, want a beer?" When they were actually moving, and he said, "Oh man, I don't drink anymore. I've turned my life over to the Lord." And my cousin started witnessing to him, and that's when Rudy realized that he had not truly given the Lord his heart as well, and that's when he turned his life over. And then, of course, as a new Christian, a new person that has accepted Christ, you got to get in the Word. You got to get some meat on there. And Rudy was a little bit, he was into motorcycles and this and that, and he really didn't want to take the time. And He had a couple different little businesses going on, his lawn business and whatever. And then finally, I would tell him, "You're going to go to Sunday school with us?" And no, you go on. So I would take the girls and we would go. And then finally, what they did was the church started a ministry, or the church that I came from, that they wanted somebody to drive the van to pick the kids up for Sunday school, the ones that couldn't get it. So they asked him, because he was their outside, he did the lawn service for the church. And so he said, "Oh, yeah." So he started just picking them up. He would go home and then come back when it was over and pick them up. Finally, I guess the light bulb went off, and he finally thought, "Wait a minute, I'm got to do all this. I may as well just get dressed and go to Sunday school." And they had an adult class there. Once he started with the adult, it was almost like a snowball just grew, because then he started, not only did he do that, then he started going out to Wednesday Bible study, and he went to prayer meetings. Next thing you know, they made him a trustee at the church. Then he became a deacon. He had been, when we moved down here, Rudy had been a deacon for like we had served the church for over 25 years.
Oh, wow.
So we had really been involved in it. And I can always remember the girls were always saying how their dad used to pray. They used to love to hear their dad pray. And my daughters have taken after him, especially the youngest one. And sometimes I say, if only he could hear her preach, because she's now married to a pastor, and she pastors with him as well. And I think the first time she sent me one of her messages, I sat on my patio and I just boo-hooed. Just boo-hooed, because I said, if only Rudy could hear that now. But I know he can hear it. He's looking down and he's saying, "That's my child. That's my child." And that's because of how he inspired them. He actually, he taught them that. And he also taught them the principle of tithing as well. Both of us did. And I can remember we were here in Florida when my youngest called me and she said, "Guess what? I can't believe it. I started tithing and I can't believe I still have money and things are going well." And she said, "I know you two used to do it, but I never believed it until now." And it's amazing with that legacy, how they come back and they thank you after they're grown and say, "Thank you for what you did for us. Thank you for praying for us. Thank you for bringing us up in the church." And and I know Rudy has left a great legacy.
Yes,
People,
he has. Yes, he has.
just his mild manner, his prayers. People even on our life group, even today, will say, "Yeah, remember those prayers? Rudy would pray for all of us." And and that was just the kind of person that he was. And he instilled that in his children, even his son. He instilled it in his son as well. Between the two girls and his son, same thing. They all had been brought up with the knowledge of the Lord.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You were saying that you instilled tithing and prayer into your children. Was there, between you and Rudy, was there a strategy that you guys used to do that? Or did you guys just kind of wing it? Like, how did you guys go about doing it?
That's funny that you would ask that, because in the beginning, we didn't have a strategy. I don't think anybody does.
No.
And then with all the things that were going on in our life, with the sickness, with my daughter, with Sonia's sickness and all, and it was just staying grounded in the church. And I think it just came as a result of that. I think just outside circumstances. And then I think once we both accepted Christ in our lives, we purposed that we were going to bring the girls up in the knowledge of the Lord too. And I think that was the strategy, and it paid off, because I look at them now and I look at where they are now in their faith, all three of them, my son as well as the two girls.
Was there any specific place that you guys ended up having those conversations, or did it just come up? Because in my family, a lot of times conversations like that would come up at the dinner table. And so I that's just, in Hispanic homes, we're just always talking. But that was in my home. I'm just curious to see how it was in your home.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think it was just an everyday conversation. Because we kept the girls so involved in the church. Between Sunday school, I was in charge of the junior missionaries. So anytime I had to go to another church or visit or take all the kids, I was in charge. I did the plays for the church, like every Easter, Christmas, whatever it was. I'd be making costumes, and I would be writing out plays, and we would be doing plays for the church. So it was just something that became part of our daily lives. So, and we probably just fell into that strategy. You know what I mean? It was like it just became part of us from just being in the church.
Yeah. That kind of sounds like the way I kind of do things. I'm a Deuteronomy 6 model. and it just talks about sharing God's word and God's commands with your children in as you walk, as you do things about your day, is as life is bringing about those things, you find the time to have those conversations as life brings it about. um, this is something with my son. We've been having to have some hard conversations with him because he's going into kindergarten this next coming year,
Okay.
and he doesn't understand why over the last few months he hasn't gotten to see his friends at school, and why he has to, in certain places he's got to wear a mask and he's got to do this and he's got to do that. We've had to have those conversations. Those conversations aren't always easy, especially with little ones.
Right.
And so I want to kind of backtrack just a little bit,
Okay.
because I'm just curious to know something. You said that you gave up your job because it was causing health issues and
Yes.
stuff like that. Do your daughters remember that?
Yes. They definitely remember it. As a matter of fact, Michelle, the youngest one, not so maybe, but Tonya, my older daughter, and she was in college at the time when I downgraded, and I remember getting a card from her, and I still have the card to this day, and it was a card that had a tree, had a nest on one of the branches, and it had a bird, and you see the bird, like they put dot 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 dots to see the bird fall, and then you see dot 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 dots, you see dots where the bird goes up. And she sent me that card, and she wrote in there that even though it seems like you were going down, you were actually going up. And I've kept that card to this day. And trust me, mark my words, it ended up working out that same way, because I turned around and 2-3 years later, I accepted a job back into management again, although I didn't have any people reporting to me. And that was one of the main issues with the stress that was on me, because I had up to like 60 people reporting to me. And it was that constant pulling and constantly, it was like, Debbie this, Debbie that, Debbie this. I mean, it was just a constant. And it had just gotten to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. But yes, but my oldest daughter definitely remembers it. And she was an encouragement to me,
That's
you
awesome.
know?
And I'm sure the rest of your daughters remember that too. Those are moments that you'd be surprised your children remember. The reason why I said that is because that same kind of thing happened with my dad. He was in a position high up, making a lot of money, and it has started to affect his health. And his doctor said, you either need to quit your job or you're going to be dead
Okay.
in 6 months to a year. And he quit his job and was making half the money he was
Okay.
making.
Wow.
And so, for a short amount of time, it was, we were scrambling as a family. I mean, I look back now and I realize what was going on. At the time, I didn't know.
Okay.
I didn't really know what was going on, but I started noticing my dad was at basketball games. And I
Oh,
appreciate my
okay.
dad. I
Yes.
appreciate my dad being there, even though he had to suffer through that, because
Okay.
I was horrible at basketball. But my dad started showing up a lot more often.
Yep.
The phone didn't ring in the middle of the night, and my dad had to just jump up and go.
Okay.
I remember there were Saturday night into Sunday mornings, early in the morning, my dad would get a phone call and he couldn't go to church with us.
Oh, wow.
And I remember times, and back then you don't really think about it, but like as I reflect on it now as an adult, I'm like, my dad made the right decision. Because it's not all about the money. God
Exactly.
takes care of you.
Yep.
Sometimes you make decisions that affect your family financially that make less money, but God blesses you in return.
Okay.
And trust me, as a child, looking back now in adulthood, I am sure your daughters are thankful for that.
Yeah,
Because they got their mother back.
Exactly. And you're right. The youngest one probably did realize that, because I did have that time that I didn't have before. And I did spend more time at home, and we took vacations and we were able to do things with the girls. So yes, you're right. She probably did, even though she was much younger. Yes, she probably definitely found out that, yes, oh, wow, this is great. Mom is now home more with us. And so, but as far as finances, she didn't notice the change in that, because I had positioned myself in such a way that I knew I was going to take a tremendous hit in pay. But the wisdom of God, whatever it was, guess what? I positioned myself where we didn't miss a beat.
That's awesome.
We continued to do the same things that we were doing. And I said, it's a God thing. That's all it was.
That's awesome. Looking back now that your daughters are grown, your daughters are doing amazing things in their communities, and one of them goes and speaks at conferences and all this kind of stuff. Looking back now at your life, would you change anything you did parenting wise?
I had to think about that one. And you know what? I would. I wish I had spent even more time with them, much more time. I wish I had been more hugs. I wish I had been much more affectionate with my girls. And then they will tell you that, and it was, I guess it was the way I was brought up. I was brought up where I can't remember getting hugs. I can't remember somebody telling me, "Oh, I love you." I can't remember that coming from a large family. And so therefore, a lot of my friends, they would come up and hug. They said, "Oh, she's not a hugger." And my kids realized that in the beginning until it finally hit a point, and it must have been that point after my daughter died, that I opened up more and I became more of a hugger. I started hugging and telling my kids, I love you more. And now I've always been an encourager. I've always encouraged my kids to excel even higher. I would set this mark. I told them, I want you to go even over that. And they both excelled in everything. So that's really, that's interesting. Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that I try to do with my kids. And the reason why I'm asking this is because I'm a young father.
Okay.
And I don't know it all. And half the time, a lot of times parents don't understand. There's no instruction manual to parenting.
You're right.
And so we're just doing things on the fly. But I want to learn from people who have already been through that. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this interview
Yes.
today. And I want to, for the young parents watching, I want to make sure that they can learn from your successes and your mistakes,
Yes.
and how to raise up their children in the ways of the Lord. And so, because I want my children don't need to be, world-renowned speakers or anything like that. But I want children who are involved in church, who then take their children to church and that do those things. And like you were saying with Rudy, that leave a legacy behind.
Yes.
And that's what I want to do for my kids, is
Yeah.
leave that legacy, so then they in turn leave another legacy. And so that's where I kind of see things, and that's where I see value in talking to somebody like you, that you've been through that, you've walked through that.
Right.
And my generation, a lot of times people kind of look down a little bit on millennials.
Okay.
We get a bad rap. I'm at the older end of the millennials, but especially at my age, we're looking at some of the older generations and looking like, we need your wisdom. We need your guidance.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why I'm here. That's why I wanted you on
Okay.
on the interview, because I see the way your daughters turned out, and I'm looking at that. I'm like, I want my kids to be that way, to grow up, and they're active in their communities. They're active, in what they're doing. If you don't mind, share a little bit about what your daughters are doing.
And that's one thing that, and I just recently had a conversation with a friend about that I'm most proud of, that my girls are service minded, that they share in the community. But our kids are imitators of us. They're not going to imitate us as servers and be out there involved in the community unless they see us doing it. And I did that. Both Rudy and I both were involved in our community, involved in our churches. And I see that in my girls. My youngest girl, again, she is a wife of a pastor, and they go out into the streets of Camden on the third Saturday of every month up until COVID, and they actually feed and clothe the homeless people, the street people. And also there's like the second or third Sunday of every month, they go into a location and they help feed them. They do breakfasts for them. And there were times where she would pack up, they would do like a couple hundred brown bags of sandwiches and just take onto the streets of Camden where there was a lot of homelessness, and they would be just giving out food. So, I mean, and they're always doing all kinds of ministry. And I look at that and say, because we serve, they serve. Now, my oldest daughter, I don't even know where she gets the time to do some of the stuff that she's doing. She is just so community involved that it's not funny. She is an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. And I mean, that's a job in itself. And then she has 3 girls herself. And, with the ages of 9, 11, and 13. So, and she's involved in a lot of their activities and things that they're doing, but she's involved with Team Straight Talk. She's in her graduate chapter of AKA. She's with the Jack and Jill International. I mean, she is just, and then she also does a segment on the TV once a month for NBC up in Ohio. So, but has her own business, has a side business besides having their practice and a surgery center. But again, community minded, and they're getting their children involved in it. My youngest one, she makes sure that her kids, and they're not babies anymore. I mean, I've got like a 17, I have a 19 and a 23-year-old from her. And she takes them into Camden also, and they help serve as well. My oldest daughter with hers, even at 9, 11, and 13, they do like a Red Door Cafe where they feed the people that are homeless and people that need feeding. So I mean, and you have to do it that way. You've got to pass it down, and it goes from generation to generation. But again, they are imitators of us. When they see us do it, thankfully, my children did the same thing. They saw Rudy and I involved. They saw us as servants, and they wanted to be servants as well. Because even right now, I'm involved in Port St. Lucie with Just Friends Social Club, and we do scholarships for high school students. And then if we find out that somebody needs something, I know Marie at the church, she mentors a lot of girls that are teenage girls that are pregnant. At one point, she told me that they didn't have decent undergarments. I went back to our clubs, Just Friends. They said, take the money, because we had fundraisers. They said, find out what sizes they need, what they need. I think it was about 11 or 13 girls that we provided undergarments for those girls. And so just serving in that capacity. Also with Lions International. I've been with Lions for more than 15 years now, and we serve the community for those people that are less fortunate than ourselves. We get out there, we're feeding people, we're making sure that sight is one of our primary goals, and diabetic screenings and things like that. So I'm involved in that. And of course, I'm involved in the church, because I still work even today with the middle school and the high school girls. And that's something I take pleasure in, because I just want to share some of the experiences that I've had, share some of the pitfalls, because you don't want them to do the same thing that you did. And I do that not only with them, but I do it with my grandchildren, with my granddaughters. You want to just constantly tell them that you love them, because you don't want them to hear it outside.
Yeah.
And and that brings me to some of the things that I would tell parents. Be present in your kid's life. Not present, meaning buy shoes or video games, or they need a new dress, or they need new outfits, but show up in their lives. Like you said, showing up in your son's life. Be present. I remember a lot of times that Rudy and I would pass each other when maybe Michelle at school, she had a swim meet. He would go with one. I would go to the basketball game. Tony was playing basketball. So we would split our time up to make sure that we showed up and we were present in our children's lives, to let them know that we were proud of them, we supported them. And that's the same thing also with not only just being present and showing up, but we've got to proclaim to our kids that we love them and that we're proud of them. I don't care what they're going through. I don't care. My youngest daughter has had ups and downs in her life. And I'm telling you, even with the downs, we did everything we could to encourage her, support her, to get her where she is even to this day. And you've got to constantly do that, because again, even with our young girls, fathers, tell your daughters that you love them, that you're proud of them, because you don't want them to go out there and some boy in their ear telling them that they love them, and next thing you know, they're pregnant. So you just have to proclaim that to your kids. Not only that, but you have to with provisions. You have to instill the faith of God in them. That's the biggest gift we can give our children is the gift of faith of God, believing in God, because he says, acknowledge him, and in all your ways, he will direct your paths. And that's what I try to leave with my girls, that, and I see Rudy and I have done a good job with that, that we know that from time to time, yes, as they're growing up, they're going to stray. But when you give them that good foundation, and you give them that same faith that you have and belief in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you let them know that I don't care what they're going through, they can get down on their knees and they can pray, because no situation is hopeless and there's nothing impossible for God. And that's how we have tried to instill that in our girls. And I would hope with any parent that they would do the same thing, be present in their children's lives, let their children know that they love them, also provide for them as far as that solid foundation that they need with the faith of Jesus Christ. Because we as parents, just as God sacrificed for his son, he sent his son for us to die for our sins. We sacrifice for our kids. Who wouldn't give their life for their children?
Exactly.
And we do. I mean, there are times where you can't tell me that with that nurturing, that motherly instinct, if our child needs something, whether they're hungry or they need clothing, we're going to provide for it. We're going to do it out ourselves to make sure that our children have. But most of all, in addition to the physical things, we got to provide the spiritual things, that strength through the spirit. That's what we have to provide for our children.
Exactly. As you've been talking, I'm just eating all this stuff up because this stuff is just gold to me. But I saw a picture the other day on Facebook of some parents, and they were holding up a sign. And all of what you said just reminded me of exactly what you said. Right now we're walking through a lot of stuff in our country, a lot of racial tensions and all the stuff that's going on. But they were holding up a sign that said, the problem that we have right now, and they had a picture of a heart, and the problems that we have is a heart issue. In order to change it, it starts here, and they had an arrow pointing down from the heart at the home.
It does.
And then they said once it changes here in the home, it changes down here, and they had another arrow pointing at the world.
That's right.
And that's what I see that you and Rudy modeled. Because what I see now is exactly what the Bible speaks on. If you parent your children right, they in turn do the same thing to theirs. Generationally, it keeps going down.
Yes.
And it keeps funneling down, where you have this big family tree that keeps funneling down. And I want to thank you for raising your children in the ways of the Lord, because that is that a lot of people think that's easy to do, but it's not.
Right.
And you show your children love, and then they in turn show their children love.
Exactly.
And your grandchildren are now going to end up doing that with their children.
Exactly.
And so you've taken your few kids and now multiplied that, and that is going out and changing their communities, which is what we all should be doing. If we want the world to change, it's got to start in our own homes. We parents got to take responsibility.
Exactly.
And right now we're fighting racial tensions. We've got to teach our children about that.
Yes.
It is incumbent upon us parents to teach our children to love and not hate.
Exactly.
And that skin color, hair texture, where you grew up is all irrelevant.
Exactly.
And that we need to be sharing the love of Jesus with everybody. And it doesn't matter how much money you make or how much money you don't make.
Right.
It's all, and that's something that I'm going to instill in my children.
Yeah.
Because just how you modeled that in your children, I want to model that in my children.
And to regress a little, we weren't perfect parents. Nobody's perfect.
No one is.
I mean, we've done some things that were wrong. I mean, there are things that, like I said, I would, if I could take back the time to spend more time with them. Even I love you more. I hug you more. I mean, so there are things that yes, things that we can improve on, because we're not perfect. We're not perfect people, but
Hmm.
we're only perfect through Jesus Christ, and
Exactly.
I'm just thankful for that,
Exactly.
and I'm thankful that my children turned out the way that they did, even though we stumbled and bumbled at times to get through this parenting
We
thing.
all do.
Yep.
We all do. And I'm sure my children will look back and think, man, you could have done that a little bit better
Okay.
and stuff. And so even, looking back at my childhood, there are things that I do differently,
Mm,
but everybody just goes with how everyone's flying by the seat of their pants, doing what they know how to do best.
mm.
And if you're raising up your children in the Lord, then you're doing your best.
Yes.
And so any final thoughts, any kind of little gold nuggets that you can throw at us the last couple minutes here.
Well, as I said before, I mean, it's just bringing our children up, and then knowing that they are imitators of us, and if they're imitators and we're serving, they're going to go out and they're going to serve also. I mean, because right now, I don't want my praise and my glory from man. I want it from God. When that day when He tells me, "Well done, thy servant," and that's what I want to hear, and that's why I
That's
want to
awesome.
continue to serve and do everything that I can do while I can do it, because none of us know if tomorrow's even promised to any of us.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for letting me come into your house and take up
Okay.
some of your day. I know you have a lot of stuff to do. And so thank you so much for sharing your life with our viewers. And that hopefully this interview is going to get shared. This interview is going to go out. And a lot of people are going to get so much out of this. And there's going to be hope that comes out of this interview. Thank you so much.
I pray so. Thank you.